Ranger fans, hello and welcome to Liberty Blue, the essential New York Rangers podcast. I am Nick Zararis. I am waiting for Andrew to get here. He didn't say he was running late, but I'm assuming he's running a few minutes late. So we're going to get the show underway for now. I'm going to take 1 second and do a good job as a content person and tweet out the links so people can get those just so we can run through. But we are here to talk, of course, about the New York Rangers, who have played 3 games since our last recording. We talked about the games, in question. Ottawa and the Islanders yesterday, both very different games that fit different boxes. And we're going to touch on both. We are going to try, I should say I am until Andrew gets in here. I'm going to do my best to articulate what I feel. And I unfortunately came up with a Bill Simmons-esque comparison. And there's Andrew texting me right now. He says, are you all good? I am in here and live already. But continuing on with that thought, the New York Rangers are in an interesting boat. As what is a good team with a first world problem? That is the best way I can describe what that is what the Rangers have. The Rangers are a first world problem team, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does create a conundrum, and I'm trying to remedy this here. Let me see if there he is. Okay. Yeah, there he is. Okay. Yeah. Continuing. I did the intro already, just talking about how the Rangers are first world problems.
Hello. Hey, sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. Technology's fickle. Restream had an update and the interface was a little bit different. So it happens.
I joined, our normal link, and I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'm here early. And then I looked at the clock. I'm like, where is everybody? And then I text you, and you're like, wait, you're live. And I'm like, wait, what do you mean you're live? Where are you? Where am I? Where's anybody? But we're here.
Yes, technology is fickle, and this website is updated twice in a month and a half for some reason. But talking about how the Rangers are first world problems, and that Mika Zibanejad is a perfect encapsulation of the Rangers' first world problems. The Rangers are a good but not great hockey team. Mika Zibanejad is a good but not great hockey player. And you have a very hard time convincing people who are stakeholders who have skin in the game that you should push those chips in to go from good to great. And that's really the most raw and distilled way I can describe this, because they're not bad. They haven't played great, but they're not a bad hockey team. We're talking about the difference between them and maybe 3 other teams who might be better than them. So it's hard because there are people, and I'm not one of these people, but old heads in particular who have more perspective about this, who know what it's like when the Rangers are actually bad and for long periods of time, what it's like if they've lived through the 60s, the 80s, the late 90s, the early 2000s. Like there are people out there who are like, you don't understand how good it is right now to just be in the playoffs every year. And that's entirely valid. You're right. It is hard to have that perspective when all you've known is the Rangers being in the playoffs for the most part. Post 2004 lockout, they've missed the playoffs 4 times, and 3 of those times they were actively tanking. So it's really hard to be that mad. But at the same time, it feels a little disingenuous when you have people who are like, well, what are you mad about? Well, we keep getting very close, and there is no concerted effort to get better, And the one last thing I want to say on this, the Rangers now are in, and that's why the title of the episode, this is a greatest hits tour. This is like going to see Pearl Jam or the Foo Fighters in 2024. We know it's going to be a good time. It is not moving the needle as far as cultural relevancy. This is what they are. The Pearl Jam putting out an album in 2023, that's the Rangers getting Riley Smith. The Foo Fighters putting out an album in 2021, that's the Rangers getting Riley Smith. That is not groundbreaking. It is not reinventing the sound or the idea of the band. It is, we want to go on tour. We need to sell an album. We need to sell tickets. We need to give people something to glob onto. Here's Riley Smith. And that's not a complaint. Riley Smith is better than what they had last year. It's disgusting. It's disgusting that Mika Zibanejad and Chris Kreider's most common line mate last year was Blake Wheeler. Was 36-year-old one-leg Blake Wheeler was their most common line mate. And they won the President's Trophy doing that. So you can understand the frustration. And that's the other thing. They have a great record right now, and they're not playing well. Imagine what they could do if they were playing well on top of being a talented team. That's the thing, man.
I mean, their defensive effort the last few games. Oh boy. And listen, like, I wanted to say this in the intro before Restream decided, what would be a great idea is for me to not use it because we're just gonna update and blank out the link that we normally use. If you there are still people on this earth, round earth, by the way. I don't know if that's a controversial opinion, Nick, but it's a round earth. On this round earth.
That's spherical, not round.
Sure. Okay.
Spherical.
All right. We'll talk about
we're going to be smart asses.
Yeah, all right. Okay. All right. There's still people on this planet that still to this day think Igor Shesterkin isn't worth a blank check, the key to the city, and probably your firstborn child. Like, there are still people arguing that, Quick could play 50 games. It's all good. Oh, you could just get anybody off the street to play 50 games. The Rangers will be fine. Did you watch the last few games? Here's the thing. If you want to disregard everything, I won't say that'd be a smart idea, but it's an idea. Let's just say for this argument, you disregard everything except for like the past 2 weeks of Igor Shesterkin's career. Igor has stopped a million trillion, not only just shots, but grade A scoring chances.
Especially against the Islanders.
Yeah. He was kind of the only reason they won that game. And I understand, the score was 5-2, with an empty net goal. The Rangers kind of, Sorokin played well as well. He stopped a couple of grade A chances, but the Rangers gave up way too many grade A chances to a team that's missing, all of their good guys, and they don't have too many to begin with. Barzal is out. Duclair is out. I think it was a Dobson or one other top defenseman's out. Islanders have nobody. And you still gave up numerous grade A chances to the skeleton of the last decade of the Islanders that has never changed in that locker room. It's still the same guys. That's who you gave up 2-on-1s, 3-on-2s, countless cross-ice passes to. And because of Igor Shesterkin, because he was so spectacular, the Rangers won that game. Give him 12. Honestly, give him 30, 40, 50. At this point, he deserves
he'd be getting 70.
He deserves every penny. And at this point of the conversation, if you still disagree, you are being disingenuous. Objectively, the Rangers are nowhere.
Or you just don't understand.
Rangers are nothing without Igor Shesterkin. It is as point blank as I just said it. And if you don't think that, I'm sorry, but you're just out to lunch. We're not watching the same game.
You're wrong. You're wrong. It's not that you're you're just fundamentally wrong.
Yeah.
The way
you
Rangers,
choose to be wrong willfully.
The way the Rangers play, when they are playing their ideal style, their first two lines, and we'll talk about the reconfigured lines, but their first two lines are going up and down counterattack. We have conceded that at 5-on-5, the Zibanejad line is going to concede more total chances than they generate, because the idea is they are going to be able to go from defense to offense quickly and counterattack, to spring, to use transition to put pressure on the other team. We agree. That is that line's plan. The Panarin line, more or less, has done the same thing. They are better at it than the Zibanejad line because Panarin is one of the best transition players in the entire league. The fact that the Rangers lack that type of transition player with Zibanejad is part of that line's issues as far as generating more offense. This year, before you had reconfigured the lines, the Cooley, Kakko, and Chytil line had given you a little bit more flavor. They had that tempo transition style because Chytil is a very strong skater. He's one of the Rangers' best transition players. It also had a little bit more of a cycle, forecheck, wear the game down. It's part of the reason they were getting more minutes at 5-on-5 before these lines got reconfigured, before going into this past weekend, where they were getting more minutes 5-on-5 than the Zibanejad line because they're more effective at 5-on-5. And that's the ideal outcome from your third line. As much as everybody wants to say they learned the lesson from Tampa Bay that you just want functional players on your third line, that only works if you actually have functional players on your third line. It's one thing to say we want to emulate what Tampa Bay did, but if all you're going to do is glob on the worst of the three guys without any means of the other skill sets that made that line. Blake Coleman's a 25 goal guy in the NHL, pretty reasonably. The Rangers didn't have a 25 goal guy they could just slap on the third line.
Yeah.
Hedel might be able to do that now, but that's a different conversation. And then one thing about it, I know the Rangers are going to, and ostensibly, I know it's more than just this. It's not just Zibanejad, but we reconfigured the entire top 9 to try and get something out of Zibanejad. And I know he had 3 points against the Islanders. They were all on special teams. I understand that by definition, because of his workload, I should expect less offense. That's reasonable. But then the coach going and saying, well, he's so worried about defense, he's not thinking about offense. That's not true.
Yeah.
If you watch Zibanejad play defense, he's not hitting anyone. He's late to pucks. He's reacting instead of preventing. If you watch and you look at the underlying numbers, he's not worried about defense. They were trying to pull the same BS in the Pittsburgh series 3 years ago. Well, he's so worried about defense against Sidney Crosby. That's why they're not generating any offense.
Here's the thing,
they were being outchanced 3-1.
Yeah, here's the thing, and I hate to cut you off, but here's the thing that I want to, before I throw it back to you, is who is Zibanejad worried about offensively against the Islanders? Who?
Horvat, but even that,
I guess.
Zibanejad is a more physically talented player than Bo Horvat. He should be able to outplay Bo Horvat.
I understand he got 3 points. Again, they're all in special teams, and those points are important. We're not out here arguing that the 3 points he had were irrelevant. They are important, just like anything else. But at 5-on-5, Mika Zibanejad is still kind of nowhere to be found. And at this point, it's if the argument from the coaching staff is, well, he's so worried about defense that he can't focus on offense. Who on the Islanders is he so worried about? It's McDavid's not out there. Draisaitl's not out there. Tkachuk isn't out there. Who is out there?
Nelson has him shaking in his shoes.
Who is out there for the New York Islanders that Mika Zibanejad is in his head going, oh, I can't go play offense. I have to worry about this guy. Who amongst us? Is this magical person in the room with us right now? What are we doing here?
And look, I'll be fair. So far this year, he's playing a lot against quality competition. When I had looked on Friday before the game against Ottawa, almost 50% of his ice time was against the other team's best players. That's valid to say he's generating less offense because he's getting harder matchups.
Sure.
That's fair. But at a certain point, when you are, 40%, 45% of the scoring chances, the expected goals. All right. I spent 45 minutes earlier today putting together these notes. I'm not going to spend the next 10 minutes reading numbers, making it sound like I'm reading the phone book. But of the 16 centers on teams that made the playoffs last year, so of those 16 guys, Zibanejad, Dylan Strome, Aho, Horvat, Barkov, Braden Point, Charlie Coyle, Austin Matthews, Wyatt Johnston, Eichel, McKinnon, Scheifele, McDavid, Kopitar, JT Miller, Ryan O'Reilly. Of the 16 centers, Zibanejad is 13th or worst in every single one of the stat tracking categories. 13th or worst. And I expect him to be better than Charlie Coyle. Scheifele and the Jets got absolutely smoked by Colorado, so that makes sense that his numbers are worse. And then the Islanders got Corsied by the Hurricanes, so it makes sense that Horvat lost a lot of his minutes too. But you can't, and look, I understand people are going to tell me, well, Nick, Zibanejad's not their first line center anymore. Trocheck's their first line center. Sure, you can say that all you want, but we didn't have to reconfigure the entire lineup to get Vincent Trocheck going. God bless him. I was skeptical of the Trocheck signing. I didn't think it made sense to spend money on what was already kind of an older group, but God bless, Trocheck has outplayed his contract and made the Rangers problem a good one.
Yeah.
It's good that they have him because it'd be a little scary to think if it were Zibanejad, Hedel, and whomstever as the third line center. But at a certain point, if we have to do all of this and we can't even get close to 50% in the metrics, I mean, if we need to break up our best line, play Panarin and Lafreniere with Zibanejad and give him Adam Fox too, at a certain point, the diminishing returns, I saw somebody say earlier today, and I agree with them. I think the best possible use of this is putting Zibanejad between Cooley and Kakko and letting them play as a real defensive third line. Because last year in the Kreider-Kakko Kreider, Kakko, Zibanejad minutes, they didn't give up anything. They didn't generate a whole lot, but they didn't give up anything. And look, I understand the Rangers are never going to do that because his counting stats are too important. But if you bump his,
you can't forget his ego.
That too. If you bump his minutes down to 13 minutes per game, 5-on-5, and you still give him power play and kill, I think you're going to get better results, and the counting stats won't look as good. But I think if he's playing against easier competition and his responsibilities defensively are more defined as, just worry about defense, you can sell me that. But if we had to break up the first line last year with Kaapo Kakko and them for Blake Wheeler to be on there because we can't just be a defense first line, you don't get to tell me Zibanejad's too worried about defense. That's just wholly disingenuous.
So, I mean, the question that I pose to you, and I guess, to people that are listening, is which other, if you want to say Zibanejad's at second line, second center, fine. Which other top 6 center making the kind of money that Zibanejad is making with the kind of role that he's expected
a winger now.
to be
I think that's ultimately
even if he's what top 6 center, wing, what have you, top 6 player. What other top 6 player in the NHL that is, on a playoff team that has Stanley Cup aspirations needs to have this many training wheels on him at all times?
The training wheels, that's a great question.
That's the question. I have to do the research. That's the question I have that I pose, because I can't think of, I mean, again, we're in the middle of a conversation, so I haven't deep dove into this, but I can't think of a single bona fide top 6 player that needs, when you go play bowling and when it's the first time and they put the bumpers up so that you don't gutter ball most of the time that you throw the ball to the pins. I can't think of another top 6 forward that has the gutters up quite like the Rangers have with Mika Zibanejad right now. I can't think of one. And that's just an objectively scary thought. You think of, Mika Zibanejad a few years ago was a real threat at 5-on-5. I mean, he was generating a lot of offense. He was really a player that other teams had to be worried about. And over the course of the last few years, his defense gotten better, sure, and he has, a harder players to defend against, and that's totally fine. But teams are not afraid of Mika Zibanejad at 5-on-5. That's objectively true. Teams are afraid of his pass on the power play, sure, but at 5-on-5, he's not generating the kind of offense that teams are afraid of. And again, it's November 4th. Peter Laviolette has had to juggle the lines to try to get him going. As you mentioned, that he has all of the toys at his on his side now, especially with Adam Fox. So now you put up the gutters. You're putting him closer to the pins. What other top 6 forward do you have to do that with? And that's the question that people listening have to think about, people that are watching the games have to think about, and hopefully the Rangers coaching staff has to think about this, because again, it's one of those things where, if he is as good as you say he is, then why are you giving him so many fail safes?
So there's a few things I do want to say building off of this. Number one, most of the league's best players, McDavid, Jack Hughes, Johnston, Elias Pettersson, JT Miller, Draisaitl, most teams, their best player is going to be out there with their best defenseman as well. If you look at McKinnon splits away from Makar, McDavid splits away from Bouchard, Johnston away from Heiskanen, there is a correlation there. Sure. That is something that is very common. Last year, the Rangers had mostly did that with Fox, with Panarin. You have your 2 best players out there, and you dominate those 19 to 20 minutes per game. You win that 1/3 of the game, and that's your trade-off. The problem is, and we all know this, the Rangers don't have another defenseman who's actively good at offense. There are flashes of it occasionally from Zach Jones, and there are flashes of it occasionally from K'Andre Miller. anytime Trouba or Schneider has the puck on their stick, I kind of do this where I'm looking through my hands because I don't know where the puck is going and neither do they. I remember one game last year, a Trouba shot just entirely missed the net and went into the crowd. And I tweeted, damn, that took out a hot dog vendor. And like 3 people replied to me like, is that person okay? Because it was believable.
Yeah.
Like that was obviously a shit post, but that was believable. That's the thing. The Rangers don't not having that second defenseman who is capable of tilting the game. And we should talk at some point about them putting Lindgren back with Fox for no real reason, but tilting the game is hard. There are not a lot of defensemen who are good at that. You know, there's a reason these offensive defensemen get as paid as much as they do. There aren't a lot of them. But this is all interconnected. You know, we talked about quite a bit at the outset about how bad the defense was in the Ottawa game and in the Islander game. That is tied to the problems at 5-on-5. That part of the reason the Rangers don't generate enough offense at 5-on-5 because they don't have the puck enough. And I called this a greatest hits album because this is what 3 years ago was. 21-22, Shesterkin played out of his mind all year, won the Vezina with a .935 save, led the league in goals saved above expected. Somehow Gerard Gallant got credit for telling him to make more saves, and that won him Coach of the Year. They went to a conference final, and they ate the cheese. Look, we've only played 12 games. It's only the first week of November. There is ample time to get some of these things going, especially considering we saw the Rangers play quite a bit better than this at 5-on-5 last year. But it's hard not to feel like they looked around and said, well, we can get by with our bullshit like people in college. I'll take a B-. And then once the final comes, they'll get a C- on the final. They'll pass. They'll go to the next semester because that's the Rangers' MO. That is what they do. It is hard to break habits. You know, as much as I was commending Laviolette for being creative with the defensive pairs, we're back to the same nonsense. Of
course.
We're back to the same exact thing.
Of course.
And you can tell me, well, he trusts them. Why? He cannot. And it's my biggest pet peeve. No coach ever wants to divulge anything of substance anyway because they feel like it's giving up a tactical advantage. If he can't explain to me why he feels the need to go back to them other than saying he is comfortable, he's not doing a good enough job. You know, I need to, I don't necessarily need to agree with your decisions, but you need to be able to articulate them well enough that I can understand them. Because that's the thing here. Just because I don't like something doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. Based on what we have seen in the playoffs for the last 3 years, these pairs are bad. Objectively. Go look at the numbers for Miller, Trouba, Fox, Lindgren in the playoffs over the last 3 years. They are objectively bad. Until the Rangers answer and can articulate why we keep doing this, it feels like we're just listening to a greatest hits album.
Think of it this way. Remember back in grade school when the teacher would, have a test soon coming up, and their thought, they would explain the curriculum in such a way that, and they would say the phrase, if you know the material well enough, you should be able to teach it to somebody that doesn't. That's the whole process of, if you think geometry so well, or that this unit in geometry so well, you should be able to teach it to somebody and then have them understand it. That is the number one way to prove that you understand the material. When a head coach or an analyst or whomstever, if you will, comes out there and says, oh, this guy eats minutes. This guy, he's comfortable with this guy. Why? And there's just blank. That means that this person does not understand the source material. Like I forget which game I was watching. It was the Flames and Oilers game yesterday, and they were talking about how Kevin Ball has the biggest jump in minutes on a new team from last year to this year with plus 4 minutes or whatever it was. And then that was the conversation. Like, that's it. And then they had the graphic up and then they went back to the game. And I stared at that thinking, but that doesn't tell me if these minutes are productive. That doesn't tell me if these minutes are earned. That doesn't tell me if Kevin Ball in these extra minutes is doing positive things for his hockey team.
Well, the Flames are actively tanking. They're actively tanking. So,
but they're still winning some, more games than they should be. So, I mean, they're I guess they're having a good time over there. But, that's the crux of this conversation. A lot of this is we'll get the comfortability, we'll get the minutes argument, we'll get the, oh, well, this guy kills penalties.
Is he good at killing
But is
penalties,
he
or does
good
he
at?
kill penalties?
But
It's
again,
chicken or the egg.
right?
It's
Like
chicken or the
no,
egg.
people aren't asking the follow up questions to these things.
Chris Kreider didn't kill penalties till 4 years ago, and he's
and
good at it.
He like literally leads the league in shorthanded goals since he became a penalty killer. Like, just because somebody hasn't or has done something in the past doesn't mean they should continue to do that based off of merit. Like, it has to be a results driven league. It has to be. If you're not good at something, you shouldn't get to keep doing it because you've been doing it for 20 years or, or 10 years or whatever it is. Like, it has to be, hey, you're really good at this, so you should keep doing that. Oh, you've been doing this for 10 years, but like you haven't really been good at this. So we're going to take you off and put somebody else in. At least try it out. It's November. Try things out. Like, we talked about this last week, where push comes to shove in a game 5 or a game 6, you need a spark. This, like, the more you try things now, the more ammunition you'll have in those do or die moments to bring out a new pairing, a new combination that other teams haven't seen or don't remember that you've ever tried before. But in the back of your mind it's worked before because you tried it for like 2-3 games or whatever, and you went back to your olden style because of course you did. But this is the time for you to try things out, going back to what you're used to because of comfortability. And even then, it's not even working. Like, I would understand it more if you go back to the comfort pairs, the comfort lines, and the Rangers played better defensively. That would make a lot more sense. They went back to their old pairings and they still played like trash in their own zone. So what is the argument now?
The Rangers are talented enough where they can get by, and that is the problem. And this has been a recurring theme since they hired Gallant 4 years ago now. They are talented enough that it gets rid of most of the problems, that they are good enough to play over their structural issues, their possession issues, and they win the goal splits. I know there are people who say, well, if they win the minutes in actual goals, what does it matter about the expected goals? That's the margin of error. The bigger the gap between actual goals and underlying goals, the more you need your goalie and your shooting to overcome those issues. And Zibanejad is a plus shooter for his career. His line in general has been a plus line for his entire career. The one thing I do want to say on this and build off of this a little bit more, if you go look at the numbers, the best counting stats year of Zibanejad's career is the 1920 season. That Rangers team was the worst defensive team in the entire NHL. The Rangers' right side was Trouba, DeAngelo, Fox. You had 3 guys who were all relatively decent to elite at moving the puck, all on one team. That tempo is not something the Rangers have been able to match since, and it is a reason there is a direct correlation between the peak. He has 23 even strength goals in 70-something games in 2019-2020. That's his career high, 41. He had his career high in goals in a 71-game season because they played at a breakneck pace because they were the worst defensive team in the entire league. Now, the Rangers are not that bad defensively. They also don't have 3 guys on the right side who are all adequate at moving the puck. We're talking 2 Jacob Trouba surgeries ago. We are talking about Fox playing against other teams' best players as opposed to being on the third pair. And we are not talking about Tony DeAngelo. Look, Zach Jones, in theory, should be able to do what Tony DeAngelo did to an extent, to a degree.
Hopefully
the
without
Rangers
the
have
punches.
The Rangers have to give him the opportunity to do that, though. And look, I think Mancini's a nice idea. He's a nice story. I think he needs more seasoning. I don't think that's a crazy opinion. And based on what we talked about last week with the way waivers work, you're not putting Zach Jones on waivers to send him back to the A because he's going to get claimed. You send Mancini back down the same reason you sent Rempe back down. He needs to play. It's why I didn't think sending Ruedel down was the right idea. He cleared, obviously, but I think that's the type of guy you want as your 7th defenseman, a veteran who's got experience, who knows how to come in and out of the lineup with regularity. And for a young guy, that's not constructive. That's not helpful. And they have work to do. I think it's really weird because when you look at this roster on paper, this is as good a forward group as they've had post lockout. At talent wise, it's as good as they have had. There is not an obvious, okay, well, let's trade to fill in this spot right now, at least in my opinion. Sure, if you want to say they bump Cooley down to the fourth line and they take out Edstrom or Vesey, whatever, that's a different conversation.
That fourth line played really well last night, by the way. I just want to highlight. Edstrom has been playing real well.
Edstrom's look good.
I'm really happy to see Vesey back in the lineup. I mean, just seeing him, skate out there, and also this yo-yo with Rempe. Now we can finally put him in the A, have Vesey as the staple fourth line right wing. That's a solid fourth, and also Sam Carrick's played well.
Carrick's been better than I expected, for sure.
He's been exceeding expectations. That fourth line, I just want to shout out those three guys. I mean, they've played well.
Yeah, they have. The Rangers have had a very good fourth line this year. The conundrum is, and this is why you might be able to conspiracy theory me into a Ryan Lindgren trade, but I don't see them subtracting from the team. But that's basically the only way they add anything of note. If they go trade for, I'm trying to think of the most average, the 2024 equivalent of Jack Roslovic, sure, whatever. That's not really helping me. If anything, you got to be looking at upgrading the back end. And the most obvious person to take out is Lindgren because of the way the contracts shake out. But he's so friendly with Adam Fox. They played on U18 for the U.S. National Development Team together. They've been friends since they got here. But do we want to win the hockey game or do we want to not upset people's feelings? Because
we've been talking about this for 3 years on the show.
The Rangers have been trying to convince me of the feelings thing for a long time, that it matters, that everyone likes each other. That's really hasn't worked all that well for the Rangers. I'm not saying we need to do like 94 Mike Keenan exile people we don't like, but at a certain level, if you keep telling me, well, we believe in our group loves each other, they'll die for each other, and we keep dying in the conference finals, at a certain point, we gotta try a different cast in the movie. That's the whole point of like the sequel, is building off of what had happened as opposed to running it back again, which is why I made the Foo Fighters allegory. They're never going to put out a song better than Everlong. They're going to keep touring. They'll put out a new record every now and then. Dave Grohl will have another kid every now and then, but we're not reinventing the wheel here. The Rangers aren't reinventing the wheel. Dropping in Matt Rempe is like having someone's kid in the band. Oh, wow, look at that. Eddie Van Halen's kid is in Van Halen now. That's awesome. He doesn't really do anything different from the last.
It, by the way, I just want to point that.
Yeah,
out.
No, Alex is good. No, Alex, yeah. Wolfgang is good.
Wolfgang's band. Is really good.
They opened for
as a complete aside, like that in
July. They are.
That band crushes. Yeah, they're really good.
They're a good band. But like, you get that's kind of how it feels, because they're trying to tell us, wow, look at this. This is great. It's the same team as last year. It is hard for me to get as emotionally invested as I was last year, because last year it felt like they were genuinely putting something together. Yeah. They put together the best regular season in the 98-year history to that point of the franchise. They had all of the crazy comebacks. They had the games down the backstretch. They stomped Washington. They stomped Carolina. And then they stomped Carolina for 3 games. They stomped Carolina for 3 games.
And then it got real scary real quick. And then Kreider said, you know what? I'm going to have me a third period. And then he did.
Yeah, that's the thing. It is hard for people to, when you have that happen, it is hard for me to get as emotionally invested. I look at the state of the other teams. The Mets, good year, not expecting as much from them. The Giants, post Eli, it has been the revolving door of hell. It is hard for me to care a whole lot when the team can't win more than 5 games in a year. The Knicks, I'm cautiously optimistic. I am too traumatized from too many, this team should be goods, to actually believe it until I believe it.
They're a fun
With
team.
The Rangers, this is undoubtedly the most successful of the teams I have rooted for. They are in the playoffs every year. They win a series most years, maybe 2 most of the time. But when push comes to shove and they are playing better teams, they can't close that gap because the margin of error is too big. They have built a team around good players who have discernible flaws, have not found the right supporting cast to help mitigate those flaws. And it feels like we're running it back. We're doing the academic, they'll win 45 to 52 games. They'll play a bad team in the first round. They will play a team they are a little bit better in the second round. And then in the conference final, they probably play Florida again. And you're going to have a hard time convincing me the team last year that couldn't beat Florida is going to beat Florida this year. Everyone's a year older, and that Florida team, they know how to win. That Florida team's gone to the Cup final 2 years in a row, and I don't want to say they dummied the Rangers because it was a close series in terms of actual goals, but they controlled the vast majority of that series. It is hard to get excited when there's no opportunities here. There's no growth opportunities. If you want to say K'Andre Miller, sure. But at this point, I'm getting pretty close to say he is what he is because he's 23 going on 24 and he's still making the same boneheaded mistakes and he still doesn't have that instinctual. I'm trying to think of how someone was talking about this. We were talking about this about Daniel Jones yesterday, but it's the same thing. You can see K'Andre Miller having to think about what he's about to do as opposed to just doing it. You know, when you watch Adam Fox make a play, he's not thinking about it. It is instinctual. The puck goes where it needs to go. When I watch Miller, he's taking half a beat, and that half a beat is the difference between being above average and a good and a great and elite. He is probably a good NHL defenseman, but the fact we're 4 years into this and I'm still not entirely convinced of that, you know,
I agree.
And it's frustrating because we do have to sit here for another 70 games.
Sure do. And, you know, I think some people think that we're doom and gloom, that we're all, you know, we're always trashing the team. I think our perspective is geared toward Stanley Cup or bust. And that's what this team is built for.
That's what the team tells us it is.
Yeah,
that's the thing. That's what if they were doing the we're going to see what happens type deal that the Mets did this year. That's very different than what the Rangers are doing, where we have the second highest price ticket in the entire league, and we carry ourselves like the Yankees, even though we have the history of the Mets.
That's
like
right.
The Rangers elitism stuff. There is a reason everyone makes fun of us. There is a reason the Islanders and the Devils fans make fun of us. Well, you guys act like you're so much better than everyone else with your expensive tickets and your aura and your history. We have one cup since America entered World War II. We don't have shit. We got one singular cup.
Right. Oh, Nick and I are asking for one. We're asking for one. And the reason why we're so, you know, I don't want to I guess upset, but you know, we're beating this drum so much is because these problems recur every year. They're the same problems. And if your goal is to make it to the playoffs and win a bunch of regular season games, then the Rangers are the best team in the NHL. You're having a great time. If your goal is to make it to the first round of the or make it to the second round of the playoffs, you're having a great time. If your goal is to make it to the conference finals, even, you're having a great time. But that's not our goal. Our goal is to lift the Stanley Cup. And if you want to lift the Stanley Cup, you have to address the uncomfortable issues that surround your team. I understand that people are friends. And I'm not here to say that chemistry doesn't mean anything. Having friends on the team and having chemistry and long-standing chemistry is a part of the puzzle. I'm not here to suggest that doesn't matter at all, because it does. But at a certain point, when you're trying the same thing over and over again, changes around the margins, and it's not working, eventually you have to look in the mirror and say, okay, do I want to win the Stanley Cup? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, you have to make the uncomfortable choices that you didn't want to make before. You have to. There's no other option, because if you don't, if you ignore the issue, which a lot of people either want to do or are doing, then guess what will happen come May when they play the Panthers or, you know, another really strong team in the Eastern Conference? They will again fall short because the same issues are going to still be there. The problems don't go away because you ignore them. The problems, like if you have a broken leg, for example, the broken leg just doesn't heal on its own. You have to go to the doctor. You have to maybe get surgery. Maybe you need medication. Maybe you need to see a specialist. There's a way for that problem to get fixed. If you just pretend your leg isn't broken, guess what? it's still broken.
You're like the horse on Family Guy. Why don't you put some weight on that leg? It's mighty. I feel great. It's mighty healthy. Why don't you go on and put some weight on that leg?
It feels so good. Yeah, like just because you choose to believe a problem isn't there doesn't mean it no longer exists. At a certain point, you have to make uncomfortable decisions. At a certain point, you have to break up friendships. If you want to win the Stanley Cup, that's what you have to do. Friendships are secondary to winning the Stanley Cup. I don't know why we have to sit here and explain to people that winning the Stanley Cup is kind of more important. I'm not saying that friendships aren't important at all. Again, chemistry is important. You need that. But do you want kumbaya moments around the campfire? Or do you want a summer of, drunken parties because your team won the Stanley Cup? Those are your two options.
Because at this point, if you're sitting here and you're listening to this, we're going to assume A, you share the same affliction, that you know that you only get so many kicks at this can, and you don't get players like Fox and Shesterkin and Panarin on the same team all at the same time all that often. And you look around at the state of the league and realize that everyone else has these flaws too, at least one or two flaws. Even Florida has flaws. Edmonton has flaws. Dallas has flaws. Vancouver has. Every team has flaws. The problem is, and as much as Gary wants to say there's parity, there's 20 teams in this league that are mediocre to outright bad. Outright bad. There are 20 teams of the 32 that are not even close. There are about 7 that are reasonably close. And then there's 5 who are good enough, the Torontos of the world who will make the playoffs and go out in the first round every year, who more than enough talent, but can't find the right mix of guys. And that's the thing. It breeds a false sense of confidence that because you beat up on the Ottawas of the world when you don't have a great game, that you can beat your division rivals like the Islanders this year, like they did to the Islanders and the Devils last year, that, well, if they can do that, they're pretty good. But because there are so few genuinely good teams in the league, it creates a false sense of confidence that because you beat most of these teams, and then when you play the tough teams, when they played Florida in the regular season last year, those were all squeakers. When they play Carolina in the regular season, it is almost always a squeaker. When they have played the Stars the last handful of years, it has been a squeaker. They've won a good chunk of those regular season games. But the problem is when push comes to shove and they get in these best of 7 series, the Rangers are a band that knows one song. And if the crowd doesn't want to hear that song, they're getting pelted with tomatoes, because that's what happens in these series. Well, we can't get anything going at 5-on-5, so we need to try and draw some penalties. And we get 1 power play a game because this is the conference finals. And, well, we didn't score on that power play, so Igor, you need to pitch a shutout until we can score 1 goal. Barclay Goodrow scored us a goal. All right, we're in business. Oh, Alex Wenberg scored us a goal. We're up 2-1 in this series. Okay. And it breeds a false sense of confidence, because when you are winning games in a playoff series with 39% of the expected goals, 35% of the high danger chances, you have to acknowledge you are not that close. Sure, you scored goals, you won the games. No one can take away from the fact they won 2 games in that conference final. They won 2 games in the conference final 3 years ago too. At a certain point, getting to game 6 and game 7 of the conference finals, it's nice for Drury, because whenever we do these anonymous polls in The Athletic and they say, well, they make the playoffs every year, they win playoff series every year, that's great. Banners, it's funny. One of my friends, he's a casual hockey fan. He went to the home opener this year. He texted me, why did they hang a banner for winning the division? Why did they hang a banner for regular season champions? If the casual hockey fan has that opinion, what are we celebrating here?
Yeah.
What are we highlighting here? We're supposed to be a high standard team. We carry ourselves that we are important, that we are maybe the most marquee franchise in the entire sport. If the standard is regular season success, then we don't get to be elitist snobs. We don't get to charge $180 when we play the Sharks on a Tuesday in January.
For nosebleeds.
We don't get to charge $25 for 5 sushi rolls. We don't get to do that if we're just celebrating regular season success, because then we're the Yankees, and we don't want that. We don't want to be what the Yankees are in 2024. We are trying
Yankees have 27 championships. Rangers have 4.
That's the problem. The Rangers act like they have 27 championships, that it's a privilege to be a Ranger fan. We have all of these great players. We always spend money. Great.
We have these great celebrities coming to the game.
I'm glad we spent $7 million a year on Kevin Shattenkirk and bought him out a year into the contract to keep Mark Stahl. That's great. At a certain point, you are insulting my intelligence by telling me this is the best we can do, because it isn't.
Right.
And that's the thing. And I understand. Then again, if you're 45 minutes into this and you're still nodding along with us, you're also sick in the head like we are. But you're going to be like, Nick, why are you so flustered? It's November. They're going to win a bunch of games. Because I've done this for a while. I have done this for a while.
We've read the book before. This is not our first rodeo reading the book. They've changed the cover and none of the actual content in the book and told us it's a new book. You should read it again.
This is when
we know the ending. We know how it goes.
This is when you remake a movie 30 years later with a different cast, but it's from 10 years ago. And look, this is the most talent. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that this is the most talented and maybe most successful window in the entire history of the franchise. If you want to go from 2011 to the present, other than winning the Stanley Cup in 94, they won a President's Trophy in there as well. They went to a conference final in the late 70s. They lost a cup final in the 70s as well. That's a different league, too. You don't get to do they did that during that window, too. Yeah, there's only 18 teams in the league, and 12 of them made the playoffs. It's not as much of a one-to-one comparison. It's frustrating because we sound curmudgeon-y, we sound ungrateful, but the Rangers are asking us for time and money. You know, I got into an argument a few weeks ago in the comment section on The Athletic with somebody about this, because this person
You're the real sicko at all this thing. I just want to point that out.
Very clearly, this is
arguing with people in Athletic comment sections. Like, come on, Nick, what are we doing here, Nick?
Well, because this guy had said, you people don't understand. When I was growing up, the Rangers were bad. We never won anything. And I replied, this isn't religion. There is not a heaven at the end of this. If I go 60, 70 years of my natural born life, we don't win anything. We don't get something at the end. There is no hockey St. Peter, if you believe in that type of thing. There is no, this is what you did during your life. You earned this. When you leave the mortal coil, the National Hockey League does not come with you. That's in the terms and conditions when you agree to make an account for NHL.com. The NHL is only for here when you're on Earth. You don't get to take that with you. You get buried in the jersey and the hat. You get a tattoo like a sicko like me. That goes with you, sure, but you don't get to bring Mika Zibanejad with you. If we don't win anything, I don't get anything out of that. At a certain point, you don't get to do the religion thing. Well, you're ungrateful. Be grateful for what you have. This is sports. Winning every year would not make it mean less to me.
If please, we were doing, win every year, by all means, that'd be fun. I'd like that.
If we were doing the Manchester City thing where we had won 10 of the last 11 leagues, I would still be as happy as shit the 11th time. It's not taken away from the other ones. Last year, I was happy as hell for a good regular season that actually had promise. But at a certain point, it's hard to get excited for this. And maybe that's me being jaded. Maybe that's me not understanding how hard it is at times. But if the Rangers are as good a franchise as they say they are, it shouldn't be that hard to make the playoffs every year. The Islanders do it.
Yeah.
The Islanders, who have 4 good players, make the playoffs every year. If that's too much for Chris Drury and the boys at Comet Pizza to do, Colony Pizza, I don't know what we're doing here, man. At a certain point, it's befuddling. And we haven't even had the second year Laviolette fall off yet. Cause that's not entirely out of the question either. They're playing like ass right now.
Honestly, we might be in the middle of it, but Shesterkin's playing so well that it kind of doesn't matter.
Hey man, Peter Laviolette winning Coach of the Year because he told Igor to make more saves is going to be great.
Oh Christ! Here we go again.
We've
read the book, but they changed the cover.
It's a greatest hits album. We didn't put out new music. We just are running it back. We got the coach who decent track record, been to the playoffs a couple times. We've got a Norris winner.
Won
We
a
got
cup when it was, the OLN network, or whatever it was,
Versus.
and
It was Versus.
yeah, Versus, and he won it in 360p standard definition, and we have to be excited about that.
That was when they still made how teams won the Stanley Cup VHSs, not DVDs, 2006. But to continue off at this point, for it being a greatest hits album, this is like the Rolling Stones in 2024. You're going to get Give Me Shelter. You're going to get the Zibanejad power play goals. You're going to get Can't Get No Satisfaction. Panarin's going to be a 100-point forward. Lafreniere is new. That would be the equivalent of dropping someone new into the band. That's dropping Wolfgang Van Halen into Van Halen. But at a certain point, it's hard for me to take them seriously as critically as I would say if we were talking about the 1968 Rolling Stones. That's what we're doing here. This is a greatest hits album. And it's good music. Don't get me wrong. It's still good music. But we are not putting greatest hits records up for Grammys. We're not doing that. We don't do that. That's not the way art works. And there's not a direct one-to-one sports to art like there is like that. But the comparisons are there. They are telling you that this is good. You enjoyed this, right? You enjoyed what we did last year. So we're going to do it again and again and again. And at a certain point, you have to put your hands up and be like, I'm not spending $180 to go see them again. I saw them last year.
That's kind of, that's kind of what I did. Funny enough, that's kind of what I did with Iron Maiden this year, because they were in Brooklyn over the weekend and I saw their set list. I've seen Iron Maiden 5 times and I spent a lot of money to go see Iron Maiden. And I saw their set list and I'm like, I kind of don't, they'll be back next year. Like, I don't want to spend a lot of money especially because I like to go with my dad too. So like, I buy him the ticket, I buy my ticket. It's a pretty penny for Iron Maiden. Let's come on. It's one of the best bands of all time here. It's not $20 in a coupon. They were here this past weekend, and I saw the set list, and I was like, I kind of don't care about like this set list. I'm gonna just see them next year when they come back. This is it. Like, this is what we're doing.
And that's where we're at, man. Because look, I haven't been to a game yet this year. I keep looking at tickets. I don't want to spend $170 to go out on a weeknight. If I go out on a weeknight, I'm not going out on the weekend of that week. And I would much rather do something with my friends with like 7 or 8 of us on the weekend than go to a game with just one person on a Tuesday, get home at 12:30, 1 o'clock, and then get up and need to go to work. It is not the same fun proposition, And it's ironic. The year of my life, I've been to the most Ranger game. I went to 30 games in 2017, 2018.
Oh, wow.
When they were an atrocity. I went to the game where Adam McQuaid beat the ever-loving piss out of Cody McLeod twice in the same game. The Bruins won that game 7-1. Those tickets were $108, and they were in the first row of the lower bowl. It is the same song. At a certain point, you need to be respectful of your time and your patience. I'm still watching. I'll be tuned in tomorrow. But at a certain point, for your own sanity, if they don't care enough to change, why should I care? That's where I'm at, man. What if the general manager can't recognize that Ryan Lindgren isn't good enough to be a first pair defenseman on a Stanley Cup winning team? Why do I have to care? If the Giants keep running out Daniel Jones, why do I have to care? At a certain point,
sure,
you reach an apathy. It's unfair, but because the regular season is what it is, because it's too long, because there are too many bad teams, you get to stat pad.
Yeah, that's kind of it. I mean, I hope that changes. That's kind of where I'm at with this. Is the Rangers are going to win a bunch of games in the regular season, and again with these defensive issues, I'd rather they happen now than in May. But we said the same thing last year. We're literally running back the same topics and same phrases and viewpoints that we had at this time last season. We'd rather X issue happen now than in May and June. Yeah, but when it came to May and June, they still had the same problems. So at a certain point, if they don't want to fix them, then what are we here for? They have to we're gonna keep watching the games. We're still gonna be way too involved in it. I'm not missing a game. I'm still a psychopath. I'm watching all of these games no matter what and obsessing over each play because I'm crazy. But at a certain point, if they don't want to change, then okay, well, we'll get to May, they'll lose in the conference finals, and then we'll run it back again. We've read this book before. We've played the Greatest Hits album before. At a certain point, if you're not going to write a new song, if you're not going to write a new book, then I kind of, and
I would rather you do the George R. Martin thing. Don't come back. Be mediocre. Be ass for a year or two. Yeah. Let someone else write what you were trying to do.
Sure.
Let everyone see that it was bad and be like, damn, I'm never finishing this, because if I finish this and they don't like it, that's going to be the last thing I leave the world. Like, we're doing the same thing over and over again. It's more than fine, but at a certain point, it is hard to get invested.
It's more than fine if your goal is to make a conference final. That's it.
Yeah.
Or if your goal is to make a second round of the if your goal is to be really good until April, mission accomplished.
That's easy.
That's right. But again, like, if that's your goal, then that's, have that be your Stanley Cup is in April. If that's what you want it to be, by all means. But for us, our Stanley Cup is in June. When the real Stanley Cup is played for, that's our goal. And the Rangers haven't been there in a decade now. It's going to be 11 years in June. And if you're so close, you're knocking on the door, but you're not twisting the knob to open it, you're not going to open the door. Like,
pushing on a pull door.
Right, exactly. Like, you're knocking, you want someone on the other side to open the door for you, but no one's going to open it for you. You have to take the door and open it yourself. And until that happens, we're going to keep talking about this.
I mean, you can look at it for a bunch of teams across the league. It's the same deal. Yeah, we've gone further than the Leafs. We've gone further than the Bruins more recently. We've gone further than the Devils more recently. We've gone further than most of the teams in the NHL. And to circle it back to what we were talking about at the beginning and to sign off here, this is epitome of first world problems. They are trying to go from good to great. It's not a very big bar. It is not a very big bar.
Especially for a team of this caliber.
That's the thing. The margins are closable. You're within the margin of error. It's finding that little bit of extra juice, whatever that looks like, and not being able to do it over and over again. It starts to weigh on you. But I think that's about it for what I've got. We'll talk to you guys next week, barring anything weird. I doubt we get anything this early in the season, but who knows? It's hockey. We'll talk to you guys next Monday. If you could be so kind, subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please throw the show a 5-star review. If you're watching over on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, ticking up one at a time, closing in on 700. We'll talk to you guys next week.